June 1944. Over the smoldering hedgerows of Normandy, a lone P-47 Thunderbolt limped through flak-torn skies, oil streaking its cowling, one aileron barely responsive. Below, German pilots on the tarmac at Everu airfield mocked a flying bathtub, certain it was already dead. But inside the cockpit, Second Lieutenant Jack Rourke had just spotted a column of panzers moving toward Utah Beach, and his gun still worked. And then he made a decision no one was prepared for. Which country are you watching from? In the spring of 1944, the Luftwaffe still believed in its superiority. Their pilots, seasoned, arrogant, confident in the sleek lines of the FW-190 and the lethal grace of the Bf-109. Dismiss American fighters as clumsy, overbuilt machines flown by green farm boys. The P-47 Thunderbolt, with its bulbous fuselage and radial engine, became the butt of their jokes. Too heavy, too slow, too American. But air war over Europe was shifting. The Allies were gaining air supremacy not through elegance but endurance and firepower, and the Thunderbolt carried 8.50 caliber machine guns. Every sortie over occupied France now carried existential weight. If Rommel's panzers reached the beaches before the Allies could consolidate, D-Day might collapse into blood-soaked failure. Fighter escorts weren't just protecting bombers. They were eyes, shields, and sometimes last resorts. Command had issued strict orders. Conserve fuel, stay with the formation, return safe. But Jack Rourke knew formations couldn't stop tanks. Only bullets could. And the P-47 carried 3,400 rounds, enough to turn a road into a slaughterhouse. Failure meant more than lost aircraft. It meant dead paratroopers in Bocage, stranded rangers on Point du Hoc, civilians caught between two armies. The stakes weren't measured in sorties but in seconds. How long it took a column of armor to cross a bridge, how fast a company could dig in before being overrun. The Thunderbolt's reputation was irrelevant. What mattered was whether a pilot, alone and outgunned, would trade his survival for a chance to bleed the enemy dry. The Germans underestimated the plane. They'd soon learn to fear the man inside it. Jack Rourke grew up in rural Ohio, where silence spoke louder than words and machines were treated like family. He'd flown crop dusters before enlisting, learning to read wind and terrain not for glory, but for yield. Rejected twice by the Army Air Corps for poor eyesight, he drilled himself with night vision exercises until he passed the third time. His instructors called him steady, not flashy, not reckless, just relentlessly present. In training, he never won dogfight competitions, but he never crashed either. He believed flying wasn't about outmaneuvering death, but outweighting it. His first combat mission over Germany ended in shame. He'd frozen during a Me-109 ambush, letting his wingman take a burst that shredded his rudder. The pilot bailed out over Belgium and was captured. Jack returned alone, labeled hesitant in his file. But instead of folding, he studied gunnery patterns, memorized engine harmonics, practiced afflection shooting on paper targets taped to barracks walls. He didn't seek redemption, he sought competence, and in the frozen hangars of England. While others bragged, Jack cleaned his machine guns with a toothbrush and prayed for a chance to be useful. He never spoke of heroism. To Jack, courage wasn't charging, it was staying. Staying calm when the oxygen mask fogged. Staying focused when tracers streaked past the canopy. Staying true to mission even when survival screamed otherwise. He'd watch friends vanish in fireballs, their laughter echoing in his dreams. That taught him one truth. War didn't reward the bold. It rewarded those who understood when to act and when to hold fire. His discipline wasn't born of patriotism, but quiet shame turned into resolve. On June 8, 1944, 2 days after D-Day, intelligence intercepted radio chatter. The 2nd Panzer Division was advancing toward Corentin. Every available fighter was scrambled. Jack's squadron, 352nd Fighter Group, was assigned high cover for B-20 hitting rail lines. But as they crossed the coast, flak ripped through Jack's wingman's plane. Then a FW-190 squadron dove from cloud cover. The formation scattered. Jack's radio crackled. All Thunderbolts, regroup in RTB. But through the smoke, he saw them, dozens of German half-tracks and Panther tanks crawling like beetles along Route 13. He radioed, Unconfirmed armor column, grid Echo 7. Request permission to engage. Static. Then, Rourke negative. Maintain formation. That's not your role. His hands tightened on the stick. Below, French villagers fled burning homes. He knew if those tanks reached the 101st Airborne, the beachhead might collapse. The rules said stay. His conscience said dive. Around him, other P-47s banked east, obeying orders. Only Jack held course, engine growling, sweat soaking his flight suit. The weight of disobedience pressed like G-force, but heavier. Fear didn't vanish. It pooled in his throat, cold and metallic. He thought of his wingman in a Stalag, of the French child he'd seen waving at planes weeks ago, now likely buried in rubble. Other pilots glanced back, confused. One keyed his mic. "Jack, what are you doing?" No reply. The squadron vanished over the horizon. Alone, he throttled back to conserve fuel, descending through broken cloud. On the ground, German troops spotted him. They pointed, laughed, waved, thinking it was a damaged wreck drifting home. Their laughter was the last sound before the gun spoke. At 8,000 feet, Jack armed his guns. The P-47 shuddered as the 8.50 S-aligned. He didn't dive steep. He came in low and level, just above the treetops, using hedgerows for cover. The first pass was reconnaissance. Speed, spacing, anti-aircraft positions. He saw no flak trucks, just infantry scrambling for ditches. On his second pass, he opened fire, not at tanks, at fuel trucks, soft-skinned vehicles, command cars. Tracers stitched the road like a seam of fire. Glass shattered. Tires exploded. Men dove into ditches, screaming in German. The third pass was methodical. He targeted the lead Panther's tracks, then the rear half-track to trap the column. His guns roared, cycling 750 rounds per minute. Brass casings clattered into the fuselage. Oil and smoke rose from crippled vehicles. A Panzer commander stood on his turret, binoculars in hand, stunned. This wasn't a dogfight. It was annihilation from above. Jack's oxygen mask fogged with each breath, but his eyes never left the road. He fired until his ammo counters blinked red. Then he climbed, engine straining, smoke trailing from his own wounds. On the ground, silence fell. Then chaos. The column was shattered. 8 vehicles burning. 2 tanks immobilized. Command structure decapitated. Survivors radioed in panic. American heavy fighter, relentless, no warning. Back at Rourke, Luftwaffe officers rushed to binoculars. That was a Thunderbolt? One asked, incredulous. Impossible. They don't dive like that. But they'd seen it. 8.50S had turned a strategic advance into a graveyard. And the pilot? He was already limping toward England, fuel gauge on empty, engine coughing. Jack then returned to base. With one engine cylinder dead and hydraulic fluid leaking, he diverted to a forward strip near Omaha Beach, a dirt field marked with white sheets. Ground crews stared as the battered P-47 taxied to stop. He climbed down, boots caked in oil and blood, not his own. An MP stepped forward. "You're Rourke? Command wants you court-martialed. You broke formation." Jack nodded, handed over his sidearm, and said only, "Check Echo 7. Tell me if those tanks reach Corentin." The MP paused. The answer would decide everything. By dawn, reports confirmed it. The 2nd Panzer's advance stalled for 36 critical hours. The 101st held Corentin. Jack's unauthorized strike had bought time. Time for reinforcements, for artillery, for history to bend. When the news reached high command, the court-martial order vanished. Instead, a general visited the forward strip. He stood before Jack, who saluted with a bandaged hand. "You disobeyed direct orders," the general said. Jack replied, "Yes, sir." The general studied him, then handed back his sidearm. "Don't make a habit of it." But the real confrontation came later. German pilots captured near Falaise were debriefed. One Luftwaffe ace, down by ground fire, was asked about Allied air tactics. He leaned forward, eyes haunted. "We laughed at the Thunderbolt, called it a trash can with wings. Then one of them came down like an angel of death. No warning, no tricks. Just lead. 8 guns, and the sky turned red. He paused. We stopped laughing that day. The interrogator noted, subject visibly shaken. The legend had crossed enemy lines. In Luftwaffe briefings, the P-47 was reclassified, no longer non-threatening. Orders went out. Treat Thunderbolts as ground attack priority. German pilots began scanning low skies, not just high. Their confidence cracked. Meanwhile, in the 352nd, Jack's squadron changed. Pilots started volunteering for strafing runs. Not for glory, for effect. Command quietly revised doctrine. If armor threatened the front, Thunderbolts could break formation. Jack never knew he'd rewritten the rules. He just kept flying. Fellow pilots didn't cheer him. They nodded in the mess tent. One handed him a dented canteen, his wingman's, recovered from a Belgian farm. No words. But in that silence, Jack understood. He'd honor the loss by being ruthless with the living. Even his former critics flew tighter cover after that. Authority had hesitated, then yielded. Not a rebellion, but undeniable results. In war, effectiveness trumps obedience. And Jack's disobedience had saved thousands. That night, Jack sat alone on a sandbag wall, watching stars blink through smoke haze. A young replacement pilot approached. Awed. Sir, how'd you know it would work? Jack didn't look at him. I didn't. I just knew doing nothing would fail. The boy left. Later, Jack wrote a letter to his wingman's parents. Not about heroics, but about how their son always shared his chocolate. He sealed it without signing. Some debts can't be repaid, only acknowledged. Weeks later, Jack was shot down over Belgium. He evaded capture with help from the resistance, walking 80 miles to Allied lines. He never spoke of the Thunderbolt strike again. Not in debriefings, not in memoirs. When historians asked, he'd shrug. It was just a mission. But in private, he kept a spent .50 caliber casing on his dresser. The last round from that day. Not as a trophy. As a reminder, sometimes the heaviest weapon isn't a gun. It's the choice to use it. The story spread slowly. Through debriefings, through downed German pilots, through French villagers who pointed to the sky and said, Lord is her. The storm of steel. The P-47's reputation transformed from joke to terror. Pilots who once mocked it now respected its growl. Jack Rourke received no medal for that day. But in squadron bars from England to Okinawa, they'd raise a glass to the man who taught the crowds to fear 8.50s. And in the quiet truth of war, that was honor enough. Courage isn't always loud. It's often the sound of throttle pushed forward when every rule says turn back. Jack Rourke's choice echoes not in monuments, but in the silence between gunfire, where duty meets conscience. If this story moved you, like to honor the quiet heroes of World War II, subscribe for more untold acts of courage. And asterisk comment below. Asterisk when have you chosen to act? Not because it was allowed, but because it was right?